Hi, and welcome to Mindshifters Radio. Today is Thursday, December 30th, 2021. And the first half of this show is going to be pre-recorded, and then Michael and I will be back with you at 1 o'clock. This is on first century Aramaic forgiveness. Enjoy.
Say, welcome everybody. Honored and delighted that you're here to share this space with us as we engage in the bringing forward of these awesome tools based in the first century Aramaic language and first century Aramaic thinking, where it was understood that we did not live in a physical world, but rather we lived in an energetic world, and the principles of how this energy system operates were understood far, far better than they are understood today, when we've been convinced that we live in a physical world made of physical stuff, and that physical stuff has capabilities beyond the power of what we're able to do as human beings when we realize that we are back of and superior to, that we are the moving force behind what happens in our world. And so we're here to, in particular, bring forward the first century Aramaic idea of forgiveness, the opposite of what our culture teaches us, as our culture tells us that, of course, if you're in pain or you're in trauma, somebody else's fault that's happening, and all you need to do is let them off the hook for what's happening inside of you, and then everything is okay. Now, of course, I could line up 7.5 billion people, shake each of their hands and tell them how I forgive them, but that won't put one dent in the pain-producing power in my mind if it's there. What forgiveness does is it opens those parts of the mind where our pain is stored, and it empowers the release of those things. So when you think of forgiveness as removal or release, rather than the act of letting someone else off the hook. And it's interesting to hear how many people talk about forgiveness, and they talk about how, yes, well, it freed me, it did this, it did that, and I just doesn't make sense that because I let someone else off the hook, somehow that's going to change the content of my mind, or somehow that's going to change the ability of my mind to remove pain. Of course, you can, by quote-unquote letting another off the hook, perhaps break the link of the pain that your mind is producing with a particular object of attention. And by doing that, there will be a tendency for that relationship to improve. But what we're really looking to do is to understand that forgiveness has the ability to reach into the depths of one's own mind, and the technology of how to reach into those depths was developed over 2,000 years ago. And when we put it to work, it just creates the most amazing and powerful results. So we're delighted that you're here to have this conversation with us, and we'd love to hear from you. If you're on one of those stations that we don't have access to in our control panel, our calling number is 563-999-3581. If you're in the chat room and you haven't registered with Blog Talk, then you can't really talk to us through the chat room. You can do a simple registration process, or you can call us at that 563-999-3581. When you do that, you'll be listening to the show, and if you push 1, that puts a hand up in the phone queue. Jeannie will know that you want to talk to us and introduce us by your area code. And so, Jeannie, do we have anything happening in the chat room? Or do we have anybody with a hand up in the phone queue?
No, on both occasions. I'm the only one in the chat room, and nobody has a hand up. Camille was talking to Dr. Tim at the close of that show, but I think we completed with her. So, and you couldn't hear her, but when you were talking to Aria, she was giving you that snarl face, that scrunched up nose, and all that. So she wasn't saying anything, but she was giving you her little face.
Okay.
So we have 53 minutes. We've got plenty of time to do a lot of conversation. Press 1.
What's on your mind? How can we support you? If you haven't put the tool of forgiveness to work in your world yet, we invite you to go to your app store, whether you're on the iPhone or the Android. And as you do that, type in the words Heartland, Aramaic, forgiveness. Actually, you only have to put in the word Heartland and the letter A, and the app will come up on your list. If you click on it, install it, you have a totally private app in which you can carry out the forgiveness process. There are 2 different versions. You can select either of the versions of the wake-up sheet, either the current 7-step or a slightly more simplified one. And each one takes you to the same place. It takes you through the steps of forgiveness. The app is purposely, specifically designed to be totally and completely private so that you can put anything in there that you choose and no one has access to it but you. If you choose to print it, you can save it to your phone. But otherwise, when you exit that particular worksheet that you do, then it disappears back to the electronic components of which it is made and is gone. So you can be assured that it's totally and completely private, and we invite you to put it to work in your life and watch what happens. No belief required, or you can go to our website, whyagain.org, whyagain.org, and in the upper left-hand corner of the page, if you click on the Start Here button right up at the very tippy top of the left of the page, and you will be walking through all of the information that we could possibly give you on how to engage in first century Aramaic forgiveness. It's the most disempowering way to do that is to pretend that whatever's going on in your mind, in your physiology, in your life is somebody else's fault. And so we have this blame game. Patrick was sharing yesterday the insight that he and Joel had shared, that Joel was talking about how the blame has been going on for so long. You go right back to the creation story, and there was a problem ostensibly with an apple, and whose fault was the apple? Well, Eve had the snake to blame, Adam had Eve to blame, and then Adam turned around and blamed the Creator for giving him Eve in the first place. And so, the blame game's been going on for a long time. What first century Aramaic forgiveness does is it totally frees one of the blame game and lets one see directly the contents of their own minds, which is that which is sourcing anything to do with pain. Events and circumstances. Short of somebody canceling the thought, coming up and punching us in the nose, all pain is caused by the unconscious internal dynamics of energies that don't belong within our structure, energies that are off the mark. Hence our definition from the Aramaic of sin, sin being an archery term that means off the mark. If you fired at the bullseye on the archery range and you missed the bullseye, then we would yell sin. And when you realize in human terms that sin is simply engaging an energy that is off the mark, and of course, to determine what's off the mark, you kind of want to have a sense of what's on the mark. And the best way I've been able to come up with understanding what's on the mark for this human system is to establish from the very beginning what was the energy that it was sourced in. And the easiest way that I know to do that is just imagine yourself or remember when you've held a newborn child. And if you go back to the moment of holding that newborn and tapping into the essence of that newborn, what we found over the years is we've asked the question to people, what was your newborn experience like? Go back to the moment where you held that newborn baby and tap into the essence of that newborn. And we get all kinds of words that are all based in love. Words like sweetness, purity, beauty, peacefulness. We get words that are reflections of the state of our created selves. And then I ask people, as they tap into that, because there's another trick that's been done in our culture, and we've been taught that love is something we're supposed to do to each other, or we're supposed to do to ourselves. And yet, if you think about that moment where you held the newborn, you'll notice that the newborn is not loving you. You'll notice that the newborn is love. It's a state of being. It's what we are. This state of active present love is our very lives. If you go back to Yeshua, it collapses and removes those false images of self, those false images of self as less than perfect, as less than whole, as damaged, as there being something wrong with, something should be different here. By removing those interfering energies, we get to go back to the truth of who we are as human beings. And we get to realize that the energy that's designed to fuel this human energy system is the energy of conscious, active, present love. And that's what I offer Yeshua King to restore life. Conscious, active, present love and life more abundantly. To allow the full experience and the full expression, no matter what anybody else is doing in your world. People say, who could be loving after watching someone pull off some atrocity? I'll tell you the person who could be loving after watching someone pull off some atrocity. The person who didn't have resonance with that atrocity. If you watch someone go into a fit of rage and there's rage in you, there'll be a tendency for there to be rage move. It's called resonance. If I forgive as to my rage, if I remove my rage, then what's left is the truth of who I am as love. And if I'm aware of that, then I can be witness to anything happening in the world. And if there isn't something in me that responds with a strong negative energy, then I will stand as a space of active love. If there is something that responds in me that takes me out of the awareness of myself as love, then I've bought into a false identity, and the idea of this work is to remove that false identity, to forgive that identity that's based in something other than love. The messages that have been given by the people around us and by our culture that we are so steeped in that we just kind of automatically and unconsciously buy into it, to start to question those things and to remove those things from our minds. That's the bottom line of where we're going with this work, and that's what we're here to support. We're here to support you having the tools, the awareness, and we're here to give the most total and complete support and knowledge and understanding of these tools that we have developed to date. Hopefully, maybe in our interaction with you today, there'll be another piece for each of us to learn in our interaction so that we can support another with it, with that understanding at still a new depth tomorrow. So we're here not as experts, but rather recognizing that we're in process as everyone else is, and simply offering the space of support and the tools that have come from the practice that each of us has engaged in, and inviting you into that practice. And then inviting you to pass that practice along to others. So that's what we're here to do. And we hope to be a blessing by being present with you. What's on your mind? How can we support you? If you're in the phone queue and push 1, we'll be having a conversation. And we invite you to, as you're doing your work, to keep a notebook with questions about, even the smallest things that need to be understood about these tools as you use them. The smallest questions oftentimes lead to the biggest insights when we get into alignment with. And the whole idea is that of aligning with truth. We'll be doing an intensive in February here in Eastern Tennessee, a Laws of Living intensive. And we put forward in that intensive the Aramaic understanding of law, which has nothing to do with this culture's idea that law is the rule of a superior and you better obey. There's no obedience required under the laws of living in the Aramaic. It is rather harmonizing with or aligning with the energy systems in the energy field in which you live, move, and have your being. And as you do that, you live in harmony with law. And so if you're ready to take your work to the next level, drop Jeannie an email, JEANIE @WHY.org. Let her know that you're interested. It's a 16-day residential intensive. There's a textbook that's about 250 pages, and it's done in a completely different approach than our regular intensive. It's done in the Socratic method of asking questions. There are several essays, several tools that move into things like cleaning up grievances in the mind toward parents, toward others. It's just a whole series of tools that we engage in and a whole different level of understanding. We introduce the concept of regulatory speech. You'll notice during the radio show oftentimes we'll stop someone in the middle of a sentence and say, invite them to go back and listen to this speech that they've used and recognize that our speech always tells us, if you listen to people's speech, if you listen to the politician who says, well, we put forward this new bill and this bill is not going to do this, you know exactly where that politician's heading. They're heading to do exactly what they said they're not about doing, because our words always tell the truth of what it is that we're about. So as you listen to your own mind and you start to listen to your own words, when you have an interaction with someone and someone says, gee, well, how are you feeling with that happening? Oh, I wasn't angry at all. Guess what? If I know how to decode my words, what I just said was, there's a part of my mind involved in the situation that's angry, and I'm in denial of it. I'm trying to hide that from myself. And when people hear that feedback, oftentimes they'll be, oh, well, that's just not true. I didn't mean that. Or other times they'll stop, they'll take a breath, and they'll say, well, let me look at that. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, my goodness, I had no idea I had that kind of anger about this particular situation. And then, of course, we point out that to believe that you've got anger about a situation is to believe in a lie. You've never been angry about a situation in your life. If there's anger in your mind can select any situation, and if you live in denial, then your mind will tell you the story that you're angry about that. And so we refresh the mind on our definition in this work of denial. And denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something on the outside causing what's happening on the inside. The common link, the common lie that's told in the culture is, you made me mad. You made me sad. You hurt me. You made me so afraid. You disturbed me so much. What I'm telling myself in this case is that there's anger and mad and sad and disturbance in my mind, and I'm pretending to myself. I'm believing that something outside of me is causing that. And when I do that behavior, when I language and express things in that form, what I'm telling myself, if I could decode the content of my own words in my own mind, what I'm telling myself is that there's a big part of my mind that I'm hiding from myself, and we call that process of hiding dissociation. If I want my mind to only show me evidence that you're the one who made me angry, then I have to dissociate from the cause of my anger. And I put this thick layer over that so that I think I won't ever have to look at that again. And yet the energy of that anger sits within me, resonates, and tends to draw somebody else in through resonance to play that out with me. When I stop playing the game of denial, when I stop speaking as though something outside of me is the cause of what's inside of me, then I can invite my mind to show me the root of the energetic pattern that's causing my anger, my sadness, my grief, my rage, my pain, whatever it happens to be. And once I can precisely confront the part of their minds that they're hiding from themselves. And so when I can do that, when I can bring the hidden part of my mind forward, and I bring that forward in the presence of love, by exposure to that act of love, the trauma or underlying pain tends to dissolve, and I get free of it. So that's the genius of the forgiveness process from the first century Aramaic. And if you're out there listening and we can support you with a question or a thought, then just push 1, raises a hand in the control panel. Jeannie will see that, and we'll introduce you by your area code. Jeannie, do we have anybody with a question for us? Anybody with a hand up in the phone queue?
No. We have many people on the switchboard, but nobody has put a hand up, and there's one viewer and then me in the chat room, and that's it.
Okay.
Along the lines of what you're talking. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, sweetie.
I was just going to say I had a conversation with someone the other day, so kind of along the lines of what you're saying around the way that we speak. Perhaps in your words, I explained in my words, the person I was talking to was having an issue come up around an interaction with another person. And the tendency was, of course, to blame the other person. And having them to shift, oh no, having them shift their words to that it was their reality or that it was their impression instead of making a statement that was absolute about the other person. I don't know if I'm trying to explain it without exposing the actual conversation.
I hear you. Well, you bring up a principle about the mind and how the mind operates, and that is that the mind is always reflecting its own content first and foremost. And when I language that the content of my mind is caused by someone else, then once again, I'm living in denial. But my mind is still going to show me its content. And the challenge is, especially when I'm dealing with content that I am pained about, is the whole culture has taught us, as we started to show out with this blame idea, the whole culture has taught us to blame someone else for it. And the genius of first century Aramaic forgiveness, it's a profound technology of the mind, is that what happens is when I apply for this, when I'm standing in this space of having a conversation about that person out there and how they did this and what they did is responsible for my pain, in that situation, I'm dissociating from the internal cause of my pain and projecting my pain into my brain's image of them. So they show up with my pain attached, and I think that it's their pain. What first century Aramaic forgiveness does, what the technology does, is it collapses the pictures that are made by the mind that keep us believing, the perceptions that the mind creates to keep us believing that it's all everybody else's fault. And, one of my tongue-in-cheek lines that I love to deliver is, you'll notice if you've been through a particular painful reality 87 different times with 42 different people, you're the one that was there every time. Your pain's perception is about you. It's not about anyone else. And the very act of holding pained perception sets up a resonance that draws someone to me, and they'll tend to play off of that energy that I am literally radiating. When I hold an energy in my mind, energy by definition is motion, and anything that creates motion creates energy waves. Imagine I'm standing underwater. I'm in the ocean with a pail of water in my hand, and I'm spinning that pail of water. What happens as that pail of water that I'm spinning interacts with the ocean water? It creates a wave within the ocean. The very pattern, if I'm going, moving rather quickly, then I slow down, then I go more quickly, then I slow down, the wave that comes off of the pail's interaction with the water is going to move quickly in one case and then slow down in another. So it's going to, in a sense, we could say it's communicating about the source of the wave that's being created. The wave itself is carrying the energy pattern of the motion that created it. And so if I hold, let's say, anger in my mind, and I talk about how everybody else makes me angry, I'm literally, those energetic patterns, by definition, energy is motion. And anything that moves creates an energy wave that communicates the source of the motion. And through what we call the law of resonance, I am, when I do that, unconsciously communicating to all the world about exactly what's going on in my mind, and it's almost like a cry for someone to come and do it to me. What we know is that resonance creates motion toward in the human realm. Resonance is an energy exchange that causes people to be drawn into the space. And so when someone does a particular behavior that bounces off of that hidden part of my mind, then their behavior is going to tend to move that part of my mind in me. And if I can simply undo my denial, if I can simply say to myself, here I am with that old instant rage. I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people. Why is it that this is going on in me again? Or still, if I can stop and own it and say, obviously, it must be mine, although my mind is so expert at projection. My mind is so expert at making pictures up that it's all about somebody or something else.
After you disappeared, but so maybe go back about 5 statements.
Okay, I can do that. So what I was heading toward is recognizing the point at which it became apparent to me, and I was shown what it is that brings real healing. And that when we are in that state of projection, when we're in that state of blaming someone else, there's a part of our minds, the part that's hidden, that is not available to us. And the genius thing that forgiveness does is it makes those parts of the mind available, and it makes them available in the presence of love. Looking back, as I said, 25, 30 years ago, I was, just contemplating the previous years of working with people and watching situations where monumental healing took place, where just huge issues would break through and break down in people's lives. And it was like something that, maybe somebody had done years of work on, and all of a sudden it was gone. They were done with it. How did that happen? Other people worked and worked and worked, but never really got that shift to take place. And after watching that for years, what became very apparent to me is that in order for healing to occur, 2 things have to happen simultaneously. One, the root of pained perception has to be directly exposed, no longer hidden in the unconscious. One is face to face with and embracing it right there in the moment. And rather than embracing it out of their pain or their fear, or which seems like a really ridiculous thing to do. But forgiveness is the act. The word forgive is shabag or shabak in Aramaic, and it means to cancel. When I cancel the goal that's driving the projection, the perception at the moment that you're the cause of my pain, that perception collapses in on itself, and it gives me access to the deeper hidden part of my mind. As that perception collapses, it opens a pathway into the hidden part. And once that hidden part is confronted and I can embrace it, I can bring it forward, fully, full-blown, total memory of that experience in the presence of love. Or, and that's when something is cognitive, or energetically I'm able to embrace that. I may not have cognitive awareness of what it was. I may not know what the memory was, but the hidden pain of it I'm able to embrace energetically and bring forward, while either I or someone in the space is holding to conscious, active, present love. And when those two things meet, then the underlying pain exposed to the presence of love, literally the energy is transmuted. It changes its form, and I'm freed of it. That's called healing. And it doesn't matter what the disease is in your physiology that's being caused by that hidden underlying traumatic energy. It doesn't matter what the physiological or emotional disturbance or distortion is. It could be, the ABC disease or the XYZ disease. It could be emphysema or cancer or heart disease or lung disease or diabetes. It doesn't matter what it is. If I can bring that energy which is off the mark, that's creating a distortion in tissue, forward in the presence of active love, then the distorted, the diseased energy, the energy that's off the mark, the sin, begins to dissolve in the presence of love. And when it does, whatever's at its root begins to heal. The physiological expression changes. So if we go to the opening words in the book of John, where we're told it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. In Aramaic, that's not what it says at all. They understood much better than we do. What those words said was, in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. That mind energy that I'm holding on to literally becomes my physiology, healthy or diseased. If it's a dis-ease energy, hatred, fear, anger, rage, sadness, grief, pain, drama and trauma in any form, then wherever that energy is stored in tissue, if it's stored in the big toe, then somebody will look at the big toe and say, the big toe is distorted, you have the big toe disease. Of course, they'll give it a fancy Latin name, and they'll have a fancy drug to try to manipulate it into suppressing the appearance of the symptoms that are there. If you take that very same energy and you put it into the kneecap, somebody will look at it, they'll have a fancy long Latin name, probably a longer name than the one for the toe disease, and they'll say you have the whatever kneecap disease. If you take the same disease energy that creates the kneecap disease or the toe disease, and you put it in the lung, the heart, the liver, or the brain, then somebody will look at it and they'll see the anomaly, they'll see the distortion of the heart, the lung, the liver, or the brain, and they'll say, you've got the heart, the lung, the liver, or brain disease. We got a fancy name, and we've got a really expensive drug to see if we can manipulate that energy. What if you understood that it's all energy? And if you have the big toe, the kneecap, the heart, the lung, or the liver, or the brain disease, you bring love present to that part of your structure, and that part of your structure instantly reorganizes into health. And there's what people call miraculous healing that occurs. It's not miraculous. If you're listening to the show yesterday, Patrick McGann called in. Patrick's been a friend of mine for 40-plus years. And he mentioned that 23 years ago he was at Heartland and did several intensives. and kind of let the work go and moved on. And he came back this past summer, having allowed himself to get to the point where with diabetes he could hardly walk. He literally had to stop due to the burning pain in his feet. He had to stop just walking up a single flight of stairs 3 times. He could, he's in his 70s, he could wake up in the morning and do 2 to maybe 3 hours work, and the pain in his feet. Someone would go in there and say, well, you see, these are nerve degeneration. This is, diabetes at its worst, and it's just the way it is. He's going to live with that till he dies. Well, if you listened to the show yesterday, Patrick was telling us that he's now up to working 7 or 8 hours. He spent 50 days at Heartland this summer. He's up to working 7 or 8 hours, and he has no burning pain in his feet. None. Now, that's not possible for a 72-year-old man to do after having diabetes for years. For those who were with us at Heartland this summer, who watch Patrick, and we talk about the general rules of where energy gets stored within the structure, and the tendency for the pancreas to be distorted by pain is usually caused by grief. And for those who were with us this summer, you remember this tough guy, and Patrick's, martial artist, military guy, tough guy. And you'll notice how many times Patrick dropped into with the support of the whole group. And he went through about 3 or 4 rounds of dealing with having been in training in the military in Korea, and that they are doing mock battles between different facets of the U.S. military, and where his team won this mock battle, and some others on the other side were angry that he led the team that beat them. And he shared with the group that the opposing team captured him. These are his own men. These are the guys that he's training with and working with. Captured him. They hung him upside down by wires just a couple of feet from the ground and set off a tear gas bomb in his face. Now, if you were there to watch Patrick this summer as he coughed and just the energy being processed out of his lungs, he went through at least 3, maybe it was 4 rounds of this just deep, gut-wrenching coughing, crying, tears, grief, and pain as he had the remembrance of this being betrayed and tortured and learning that there was nobody he could trust. If you remember the look on his face, anybody who's listening that was there this summer, remember I was like, I just couldn't understand. These are my own guys. What are they doing? Torturing me. I mean, seriously torturing him. But Patrick went from where there were 3 stops in order to go up the steps to where he was walking his dog at Heartland. And for those who've been there, there's this big circle around the property, and then the road that goes down to the lake, the road that goes up to the top of the hill. He got to the point where he'd walk that whole road with his dog, 1 mile to 1.5 miles every day with no foot pain and without stopping. Now, people would say, no, that's just not possible. He's got the physical result of the physical disease called diabetes. Excuse me. If you believe there's such a thing as physical, you're living in a fantasy world. Let's listen to Einstein, as he says, on such things as matter, we have been all wrong. What we have heretofore called matter is energy whose vibrations have been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. Einstein tells us matter doesn't exist. Max Planck, when he was receiving the Nobel Prize in Physics, back at the turn of 1900s, Max Planck, as a physicist, says this: as a man who spent his entire life studying matter, I can tell you this much. There is no matter as such. Our entire world is made of succeedingly smaller patterns of vibratory fields, one nested within another, nested within another. Do you have a disease going on? What have you nested into the tear, whether it's the big toe, the kneecap, the liver, the lung, the heart, or the brain disease? What have you nested into the big toe, the kneecap, the lung, the liver, or the heart to create that distortion? What's the energetic anomaly there? And can you access that and bring it to the presence of love for dissolution, for forgiveness? And that, my friends, is the essence. So that's the essence of the healing process. And when I can bring that nested frequency, that underlying energy, forward to conscious awareness. Now, it can be cognitive. You know, in the case that I just shared with Patrick, he's right back, hanging upside down in the tree, remembering, and it was interesting to watch his gyrations to see what tip himself over almost upside down to cough out this, tear gas, to cough that out of his lungs, to cough that energy out of his body. And as I lift the overlaid energy from the tissue that's been distorted, yes, somebody will look at the tissue and they'll say, see, it's supposed to be shaped like this, but it's shaped like this. So we know it's disease. Well, what's happened is the energy that's been overlaid on the tissue is what has created the distortion. And when I remove the overlay, and the removal is the act of forgiveness. When I remove the overlay, the big toe, the kneecap, the lung, the liver, the heart, or the brain, whatever it is, goes back to a fully healthy state. The energy is always willing and ready to spring back to full expression if I'm willing to face, bring love present to whatever I'm hiding from myself. And that's the essence of the miracle of healing. You go back to Yeshua, and of course, there's this whole magic story about this magic man who fixed and healed all those people. But you'll notice that in those healing stories, when those people wanted to turn to him and say, wow, look what you've done, what did he say to them? Now go read the story of the woman who has this issue of blood. She has a continuous menstrual flow and has had that going on for 12 years. She has this inner knowing that if she can touch the hem of his garment, does that mean she wants to touch a piece of cloth? No, that's a metaphor for being in the energy field of empowerment for healing. When she touches into his energy field, she is vitalized and empowered, and it's that high vitality state that allows us to recapture from tissue the overlay that creates the disease and the distortion and remove that distorted energy. And you remember when everybody wants to make him the hero, he says to her, woman, your faith made you whole. The action you took made you whole. Yes, I was here as your support. I held the space for you. But it is your work that made you whole. If you are going to heal in your life, it's your work that will make you whole. And Yeshua provided the exact tool for how to do that. Once again, the tool is called forgiveness. Forgiveness is the tool with which you reach inside the hidden parts of your own mind, which reflects as your physiology. You access any dis-ease energy, any energy that does not belong, and you remove that energetic pattern. Removal is the act of forgiveness. Take the overlay off the pancreas starts to function again. Take the overlay off of the heart, the brain, the lung, or the liver, and that tissue begins to act in full function again. It looks distorted and diseased because of the energetic patterns of disease that have taken the tissue over. Breathe, forgive, access and remove what doesn't belong. Bring forward the presence of love. Put a smile on your face and activate the frontal lobes of the brain where Rachma resides. And in the presence of that act of love, all dis-ease energies begin to be removed from the system. Feed the system what it needs to be fully functional, and you'll function as a human being again. We're here to support at depth the understanding of the principles by which that healing process operates, and to be the space and to empower you to understand the principles and then to enter into the practice of using the tools that empowers that energetic shift to take place. And such things as the burning, searing pain in the feet of a man who's been 5 decades holding the grief and the pain of being betrayed by his own men. Embrace that energy and love dissolves the overlay that causes the thing they call diabetic neuropathy, and the feet move in a healthy manner, and the man walks for miles. Before, a single flight of steps was more of a challenge than he could handle. It's so awesome to watch the process occur. It's so awesome for people to step into the use of that tool. Again, if you don't have the Forgiveness Wake-Up Sheet available to you, go to your phone app store, type in the words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness, download the app and put it to work. Or go to, go to our website, whyagain.org, upper corner, click on the Start Here button, and you'll be utilizing the first century Aramaic forgiveness process and learning everything that we've come to know over the period of almost 50 years of working with this tool. That's what we're here to share with you and to make yours. And so we're down to the last minute or so. We're honored and delighted that you're here with us to be part of this conversation. If this show has been meaningful for you, when the show is over, you can go to whyagain.org and click on the microphone on the page. Go to the archives. You can save the MP3 to your phone or to your computer, or you can copy a link. You can send the file to someone or send someone the link and have them give a listen. In the meantime, we're here to support you creating the best year yet of your eternal life. That is an awesome gift to give the world, and we're here to support you getting it.
All right. Thank you for listening to that pre-recorded show. Today, we're going into the second hour of Mindshifter.
Where there's injury, pardon.
Yes.
And, so
that is one of the suggested prayers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an awesome, powerful prayer. It's powerfully spoken by St. Teresa